information, and I was beginning to see how everything was connected. And I thought, well, I'll write a book about that. But there was still something missing. And I had started to write the book, but but still something didn't feel right. And so I finally thought, okay, for the first time in my life, I really started to meditate and pray and ask for help. You know, what is it that I'm supposed to write about if I'm supposed to be a writer? Because, it's one thing to just have a stranger who, obviously claims to be psychic. And as it turns out, she was, and she was very, very good. But you don't want to just write something because somebody said you should. You want it to mean something. You want it to be of service somehow. So when I really started to meditate and pray about it, I started to have a period in my life where I started having information kind of downloaded to me in my dreams. And I use the word download because it wasn't like having a conversation or watching a movie. It was images that had very, very complex and deep concepts attached to them. and before you really absorb them all the way, there's no context for them. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
There's an inner knowing, but there's no way to express that verbally. You just feel it. You just know, but how do you say it? So it took me about a year, actually, to digest and process all of that before I really understood that what I had come across was something really big, but I just didn't know until I started really meditating and praying and trying to get in touch with what a lot of people refer to as the higher self. And that's when the real magic happens. That's when you move beyond book knowledge. Because I think that a lot of people, based on my own experience, are looking for that one book that gives them the answers to everything. Or they're looking for that one magic pill that they can just hurry up and swallow and, they'll get it. And it doesn't work that way because it's not about learning something new. It's about remembering something very old. And that information really does come from inside. But the external knowledge is what helps you put it in the proper context in the world that you see around you. So that's really what happened. I had this what seemed like an innocent experience that just changed my life forever, and it was difficult, and I think that a lot of people are going through it now. But I also think that it's necessary. It's the way that we get where we need to go. And there's a neat quote that I'd like to read, if you guys don't mind. And it's from Carlos Castaneda from his book, The Active Side of Infinity. And I think that this really sums up what a lot of people are going through. And it says, the end of an era was, for Don Juan, an accurate description of a process that shamans go through in dismantling the structure of the world they know in order to replace it with another way of understanding the world around them. And that's what's happening for a lot of people right now, because what they thought they were, who they thought they were, because it was artificial, is being stripped. And I know that that's a very scary prospect for a lot of people. But I think what people really should focus on is not what's crumbling and being removed, but what will be rebuilt in its place. And that is what is so exciting right now, I think.
You want to talk about synchronicity? I had the book open at that exact page, beginning of chapter 9, the one law. Yes, I did. Yeah. And I was going to read that to you, actually. I was going
to. That's so funny. Yeah, that's great. And that really is happening for a lot of people. And believe me, there's nobody more than me who gets how painful that process can be, because it can take a really long time to understand what it's for and what it's about. And it's not about punishment. It's not about, it's kind of like when people go into the military, like you'll see these commercials where a family will send their son off to boot camp and he'll come home and he's a different person. In that particular situation, what will happen is the child, the individual who joins the military, is torn down and then rebuilt for the military purpose. But I think what a lot of humanity is going through right now is that they're being torn down to be rebuilt the right way. And during the tearing down phase, it can be a very difficult thing to go through if you can't understand how beautiful the rebuilding phase is. And I think that, I know it's hard, but if people focus on how beautiful it can be once we rebuild over the top of all of this nonsense, that's when you and I are going to see changes on the planet that are just going to blow people's minds.
Yeah, I think already we're seeing changes. I mean, just with the whole, not to keep going back to it, but just with the whole rice experiment and other stuff that's coming out, just like none that I could think off the top of my head that are coming out like that, it really shows you that something else is coming out. And what happens to each individual when we break down, because we've all gone through it, it's starting to happen to the society. And you can really see that with just, the banks and everything crumbling.
Yeah, I mean, those are artificial structures that keep us from remembering who we really are and what we came here to do. And what we didn't come here to do is make money. So the problem is that we're in the middle of that very difficult transitional phase where, because we allowed that structure to exist and become the backbone of our reality, getting out of it is a very difficult process because we are still dependent on it.
But a lot of people think that this is like a school for souls, but and then on the other hand, they say that we were created perfect beings to start with, and we have de-evolved into this existence that we have now. What's your viewpoint there about? Are we in a school of sorts that we have to do something to quote unquote graduate or ascend?
Yeah, I think so. I think that creation always has a purpose, and souls create in one plane. They can create and manifest physical existence. But it's like anything else we do. I mean, so much of what we do down here is a reflection of higher truths, but we just don't see it. So, for example, if you and I build a house, we don't just build it and stand back and look at it. We live in it, right? Or if we create a car, we don't just say, oh, look what I made. We get in and we drive it. And so I think initially what happened was a bunch of souls got together and they created this beautiful planet for the purpose of enjoying it. But then something happened, and we kind of got lost. And so it is a school, but I think that it's because we have, as co-creators, determined that that's the purpose for it now, even though that was probably the purpose for it in the beginning, because obviously if you experience something, you do it for the experience that you gain, which is itself kind of a school in a sense. But it's been kind of twisted, misunderstood, and forgotten. And so our souls are perfect, but our souls wanted experiences that we became so involved with that we forgot who we are. We forgot that the true self is the soul and not the body. And I think that of course there are people here who love it here so much they don't ever want to leave, because I think they themselves forgot. And so controlling what we believe to be reality has a lot to do with the problems that we have, because if all of us ascended, where does it leave those people that don't want to leave? There's nobody left to control. There's no, you can't be on top if there's no bottom, right? So a lot of people are struggling to find their way. So yeah, it's a school, and the word ascension is a word I don't particularly like because I think that it's not properly understood. But it's not so much that we are trying to become something new, it's that we are trying to remember something very old.
So you create something that's perfect, but when you create something that's perfect, then there's no room for it to evolve. So the way I started the way I've been looking at it for a couple of years now is it's perfect because it's always evolving. And I'm just speaking of our 3D reality here. Is that the way you see it, or?
The true answer to that is yes and no, because what we originally came here to experience is no longer what we are experiencing. To experience physical form is to experience all the pleasure that that form offers. But if it becomes perverted and we enjoy the perversion, that's kind of part of the fall, I guess you could say. And now we're trying to get back up to where we were. So, for instance, you know, for all three of us, I think, living here in this life, you and I don't have to kill and murder and steal and rape and pillage to enjoy it, to have that experience. So we originally inhabited physical form to experience what those forms could offer. But at some point it became perverted, and we kind of lost touch. So, but the interesting thing about it, though, is that the sacred science, what is often referred to as the one law, is a great teacher because it reminds us when we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing, because that's when suffering enters the picture. So my personal feeling is that suffering is not necessarily the best teacher, but we choose if that's the way we want to learn or remember based on our actions. So it does have a place, and it has a very beautiful place, because what if there was no suffering? What if we could just endlessly mess it up and never have that lesson to kind of get us back on track? So it's helpful, but I personally don't believe that was the intent originally.
Well, then you can look at it on the, let me play devil's advocate here, sort of here. You can look at it on this in the way of infinity. Okay, so we have an infinite universe with an infinite number of planets, with an infinite number of dimensions, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, through infinity. So eventually we would find this exact same situation that we're in right now, because this is something that we have not experienced yet.
Well, something that I learned through the sacred science is that as creators, we are experiencing the creation, but it was supposed to be an endless cycle of creating. But when we give that power away, we stop creating, and then you get into the mode where you see destruction and suffering. So, for example, did I come here because I wanted to experience suffering, or did I come here because I wanted to learn more about creating in the material plane? So, for example, did I want to get to a place where I could create solar systems, where I could create planets and animals and experience those creations and continually create and continually experience the creation in a positive way? So I think that we just kind of lost our way a little bit. I really don't think that suffering has to be the teacher, because I think that we were meant for greater things and we just kind of lost our way.
Is that the purpose of dreams? Because in dreams, I teach English here in Japan, and in a lot of my classes I've been discussing dreams. And one of the things I find, especially in lucid dreams, is that as soon as you realize you're dreaming, you become the creator. And what I mean by that is you'll start creating your reality. Okay, I don't want to be in my house. I want to be at a certain beach in Mexico, example. I want to levitate. I want to put my hand through walls. So you're doing all these things in dreams that at the moment we don't know how to do in this reality. So is that the purpose of dreams, to constantly remind you that you're able to create these things?
Well, I think, I think that dreams are just really a magnificent thing that people just don't give enough attention to. I think that dreams remind us about a lot of things, and a lot of times what we experience in our dreams is the oversoul kind of bleeding through and trying to snap its fingers and say, hey, do you remember this? Do you remember who you really are? Do you remember that you have this potential? And then other times, I think for a lot of people who meditate and pray about a very specific issue, again, you'll get information in your dreams, whether it's from the oversoul or the subconscious mind, or what some people refer to as spirit guides or angels. But the dreams are important because they're reflecting something back to us